Good. So many here are going to think we're going to talk about boring EV charging, but we're actually going to talk about explosive growth of a company, which I find more fascinating than EV charging. So thanks all for coming. I'm really happy to be here with Casper, who's the CEO and one of the co-founders of Monta, which I think all you Danes probably know because they're amazing, and all of you who are trying to charge your car probably know of. But I want to figure out, first of all, Casper, this whole company, how did it get started? You were the CTO of a massive company, Monster Lab, before, and you were not keen on starting a startup. And what happened? What happened in your life that made you do this?
Yes. So I was an EV driver already, and been building a lot of mobility apps for taxi companies and food delivery. And then I actually saw that the experience for charging was not at the place it should be.
Understatement.
Yes, understatement. So it was a consumer pain that I saw, and then I got dragged into it, started looking into the industry, and it was getting more and more interesting quickly. And then I decided that this is probably the next thing I should go for.
But it's to the degree where if Anders, your co-founder, you were more or less saying no to start a company for quite a while in 2020, and then he was like, we have to start it. And you were like, no, we have to start it. No, I've got a great job, I have small kids,
yes, exactly.
This is not the time in my life.
I considered if I should just invest into it, and then I was like, no, this has to be something I'm involved in.
Yeah.
So yes, I threw a lot of stakes on the table and went for it.
Yeah, you're the reluctant founder. I think that's the best way.
Yes.
But how big is the company now, and how much have you raised to date? Because you started it 2020.
Yes.
And then
Yeah, so we raised 50 million euros so far, and we are 200 people in the team. We are operating in 9 countries in Europe. Have offices in Copenhagen, Berlin, Paris, London, Barcelona.
So you're the classic explosive startups, 50 million euros, 200 people, massive, in 3 years. I mean, I think that we all know that electrical vehicles are better in every shape or form, that it's better for the climate, better for maintenance of the car and everything. But I don't understand, and I mean, when we invested, we actually spent quite a lot of time trying to figure out why is it so goddamn hard to actually figure this problem out. How do you need a 200-person team? Because it feels like you plug in your charger. Why is it hard?
Yes. Yeah, and I think we saw it a little bit the same way in the start. Let's build a killer mobile app, and then we kind of solved it. And then we just saw what both the quality and the experience was not at the point we wanted to, and then we start really looking into how to get there. And that was by going deeper and deeper into infrastructure and building more and more of the layers in the stack. And that's where it gets super complicated. And now there's more than 400 different charge point models on our platform today. They're running different firmware versions, installed with different connectivity. There's the governments in the different countries are coming with different rules we need to apply to always. So it all got really complicated fast. On top of that, last year around this time, we saw a really volatile pricing and energy, and that also pushed the feature set forward in terms of dynamic pricing. So I would just say a lot of things which looked easy in 2016 within charging suddenly got pretty complicated. And we managed to use that a big advantage.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, when we met, you were doing the Airbnb of chargers. It was you've always been an amazing product person, and I think it was very much product-led growth. It was going for residential, and then you moved from residential to SMBs, and then you moved from SMBs to enterprise. I mean, I think that most it's one of those journeys that feels why did that happen? Take us through the journey, because it's one of those that most startups, I think, I don't know how many founders are listening, but it's one of those that everybody tells you to be a one-trick pony, don't do too many things. But you did this 3-pronged journey. Yeah, would you do it again? Why did you do it?
So I think from the start, the thesis was let's get access to as many charge points as possible. That's going to be the advantage down the line. When we get to a point where our vehicle to grid, etc., gets the norm, having access to 1 million charge points makes you very relevant here. So that was the original thesis, and then we're who's the quickest ones we can get to adopt this? That was the residential users. So we started with that. We did smart charging, we did roaming solution where you have access to all the other networks. And we had this peer network where you could share charging with your neighbors and we started there because that moved really quickly. We got 10,000 users on pretty quickly, and we could kind of learn a lot from that. Then, as we grew the company, we also needed to make sure that our revenue was kind of fitting where our spend was, and that was by going more into business charging, where our payment solution could be used on a lot of charge points. So we start slowly moving into that. It was the feature set we had from the start. We just need to kind of point the cannon to a different segment. We discovered that the installers of the industry really could do all of the work if they had the software. So we figured out that we could enable them to go out, and then you have an army of what's called installers, electricians selling in their neighborhood, in their local community. So that was the second part of the strategy, was to kind of focus on that. And that was also something we could replicate outside of Denmark. So we used that to enter Sweden and to enter UK, and that went really well. And then as we matured the business, we saw that larger and larger installers were getting interesting. We have companies now with 500 installers, 800 installers. So it's getting slowly into enterprise. Wholesalers started to reach out and wanted to do agreements with us. So the last part really just happened naturally. We saw also in the market there was not really any companies which could service the enterprise segment, like having enterprise-ready software in this early stage of industry. That's not a lot. And having the size of a company where you can actually do the SLAs and the cybersecurity audits and all that, which is required to service them. So around this time last year, we saw that, and when we decided to start the journey on that, go for ISO 27K cybersecurity audits, and set up the company to be more focused to enterprises. And then when we enter this year, we just been kind of landing them one by one. So that strategy worked out very well.
And it feels like, I think that, I don't know how many times I myself have dreamt of or seen the idea that you empower some community to do sales for you and do the heavy lifting. It feels like, doesn't everybody say that? Like, oh yeah, we're trying to get Salesforce to sell for us or whatever. But I mean, you really did this with installers. Like, you really got installers to be originally like your main source of sales. Like, you didn't have a massive sales team. Mm-hmm. First of all, how did that actually, why do you think that is? Why do you think it worked for Monta? And then secondly, how has your sales team developed from kind of more of like empowering, installers to being able to handle, almost nation-state level sales, right, in some cases? Mm-hmm.
So it started with that thing where we actually went after like car dealerships and spent 3 months failing on that, and then we decided, okay, that doesn't work, let's try something different. And then we looked at the value chain again, and we saw installers in this part of the world, all high voltage units, which is our charge point, needs to be set up by a certified electrician. Mm. So they are kind of the gatekeepers here. And then we decided to look further at it, and we could see that the electricians, they got a lot of charge point installations when it was one charge point in a residential. As soon as it was 2 or 4 or 8 charge points at a like housing association or a hotel or corporate parking, they didn't have the software to win the deal. So they had to pass it on to Clever, Eon, Octopus, etc. But with our software, they could actually go out and win that deal as well. And then it's not 1 day of work for them. Now it's 2 weeks of work where they are going to cable and connect it all. So for them, they also saw that this is a massive business opportunity. Secondly, we could offer them a way where they got part of the recurrent revenue. And there was a handful of them in the early days which really saw that and went for it. And they built up really, really nice recurrent revenue streams today because of this.
And I think that's the magical trick, right? I think that there's so many industries right now where people are coming in and they're putting something in an outlet, being a heat pump or like hotel installation, and it's a transactional sale. They put it in, they get paid for the job, and they walk away. But you were able to kind of, again, like empower them to win the big deals, but also you've built so many kind of internal software products. And then over the time, I think that you have I think it's very interesting that you have like a procurement sales team that handles, and it feels like you're really trying to figure out to productize your sales, not only like product-led growth, but actually you have like a whole thing that generates like the answers to big tenders, and like you're really trying to build software Where did that come from? Was that because you had to do it at Monster, or like where did you figure it out?
I think the reasoning behind it was that like if we don't started doing that, then what was the product the installers ended up selling, and how could they compete with the large companies in the industry? But secondly, it's also just when you start targeting thousands of installers in UK, you are getting hammered down on the phone as well. So if you don't productize it, you will be spending all your time on that. So we sent out mass emails, we took a lot of intro meetings and showed them the platform, and pretty quickly we got them on. And we had this idea about that the next 2 years it's going to change a lot how the business is. So let's hire entrepreneurial salespeople. We called it country managers. Go into the country, figure it all out. There's no playbook, there's no rules, more or less. Go for it. And that played out very well. And now here, over the last 1 year, we are moving into our matrix org to sell to enterprise, strategic, commercial, etc., and building up the full kind of SaaS machine around it now. But that was 2 years in.
Yeah. And then it's like, how many charge points right now like are controlled and powered by Monta?
So we have around 100,000 business charge points, and then we have access to like 450,000 from other networks.
And I think the interesting thing about that is also, of course, that the charge points are kind of a big part of the grid as well. So like there's so many, like most people kind of see the Monta app, but they don't realize the back end. But the same thing, of course, people could think about from business case. A VC could look at it and say, oh, you get a cut from being the gas station, but you also actually end up not running, but like balancing the grid. Mm-hmm. But that was something like came to you, actually. It was like more or less like customers started asking for it.
So I think the idea around the grid was there from the start, right? The industry called it like the demand response and like frequency regulation. And then around, I think, June last year, we started actually looking into it more. And I have a background where I spent a lot of time looking into different tech solutions, different industries. Yeah. So I just started really digging into it. Took a lot of meetings with professors from technical universities and companies in the industry, different aggregators, etc. And then after like 2 months, I was like, this is actually pretty insane that it works. Like the grid is all connected from Norway to Spain, and we have all these transformer stations which are kind of balancing the frequency. It's 50 hertz. If it drops to 49.6, we have a blackout. Yeah. And then after I discovered that, I was like, okay, this is really hard. But also there was some new products on the market from the TSO in Denmark. That's Energinet, where they are paying money for companies to help with flexibility around the grid. So every day they would tender out, we need this many megawatts available here and here and here and here. And you need to be able to react in 1 second, 5 seconds, and 30 seconds. And then the whole chain starts when the frequency then drops. So that's called like FCR and FRR markets, ancillary services. So we started looking into that, and we ran some tests, worked a little bit with DTU in Copenhagen, and we could see that we could react in less than 5 seconds from we get the frequency into the cloud to the car stops pulling energy in the end, and that was enough to be able to do this. So we spent some time building that up, and it needs to be really, really low-level stuff where you integrate very, very deeply into the charge points. And just this summer now, we then got it certified with Energinet that we can aggregate hundreds of charge points together, and then they will see it as one asset, the same as a battery, something, and then you can go out and participate in these services. So that's a new revenue stream we found on that.
And it's really, I mean, like, you're really becoming critical infrastructure in that sense. And I think, for people who haven't thought about this, and when you have a normal, old school, 1980s power plant, like a fossil fuel plant or a nuclear plant, it pushes out electricity at a certain pace, and you can kind of like regulate it like a stove. But with solar and wind, they're intermittent, right? So they go up and down because of the wind. And when that happens, what are you going to do? The only thing you can do is like turn on a gas stove to get more energy, or exactly, you can turn off the cars, which is like crazy. And of course, eventually you could also pull from the cars if you want. You can become like actual whole electrical infrastructure.
Yes.
In many senses, like you're both handling the move or empowering the move to a more regenerative, like solar and wind powered grid. but you're also, of course, empowering the proliferation of electric vehicles. In many shapes and forms, you're a climate company, but at the same time, like if we look at every single investor who came after us, or a completely normal investor who came in and said, this is a crazy business, you're growing explosively, you have really good revenues. I mean, the previous panel was really about like you have to have both growth and you have to like, look at actual dollars made. You can't just like grow and not make money, and you can't just make money and not grow. And like, how much do you think you benefit, leverage, or shrug at the fact that you're a quote-unquote climate company?
Mm-hmm. So I think I would categorize the company as we are a tech company which are in climate. And part of what we are doing is helping the transformation of electrification and vehicles. But we're also building a business while we're doing it. And it's something we had to talk about very quickly because we also got a lot of people applying to the company to come in and save the planet. And I think that's all good, but we also need to make sure we build a company while we're doing it. So we had that balance all the way through. It's something we started really picking up on ourselves from the very start, that we're doing a lot of things internally to have a lower footprint. We just got the B Corp certification actually 2 days back.
I didn't know. Yeah. Wow, cool.
Yeah, we are offsetting all the CO2 we are producing, and we are having a vegan lunch. We are not flying around the world. That's my co-founder, Anders. Yes. But yeah.
But it's like, and actually I would say, I don't know about you, but if you've been to a Danish canteen and you're vegetarian, it's not the greatest experience. And I think you've done a crazy transition. You've gone through a lot of caterers to kind of find somebody that creates really, really good food. So I think that big kudos for that. I am really happy about that. Every time I'm in our office, I'm like, whoa, there's good food. That's really good.
The first Monday where we just asked our existing catering company to, for Monday, just start bringing vegan, that was not the best experience.
No, it wasn't exactly. And if you look back now, I mean, you've got 3 kids, right? Like two kids. I was just thinking it was a tiny kid at least. So like you've got 2 kids. I mean, you're in any shape or form a grown-up. If you look back at like your previous career, what are like advices you would give yourself where you feel like, how do you build a startup? Because I mean, you've been running like for 3 years now. Like it's just like super, super high pace and scale the company really well. Like is there anything you could like tell your old self?
So I think when we started, we didn't expect it to go this fast. I remember we made a plan where, okay, we're going to be 10 people for a year, and then we're going to raise a few million euros, and then we're going to scale up to 20 people. We're going to do that for 2 years. So I think it surprised us how fast we could do it. But we've also been really quick at just changing up our mind and saying, okay, now we try this, it didn't work, we do this instead. So the amount of iteration went through. But I think the thing I would tell myself is make sure to get some sleep, because it's going to be crazy.
Yeah. It's the benefit of having small kids. They kind of force you into that mindset.
Yes.
Casper was going to go to an event last week, and then like we were talking about it, and Casper said, like, my wife is traveling, I've got 2 kids, there's no chance I'm going to come, I'm sorry. Yes. And I think that priority is like when you're 21, you just go to the next party, the next party, the next party. Now you're like, sorry, yes. Priorities.
Yeah, and you have to pick your battles. And last week, that was unfortunately, wife was out of town, so that was on me.
I think it was a good choice of that battle. I was thinking because everybody, I think the whole world is now, not the whole world, but like many parts, and this definitely in this room, are talking about, can you raise money? It's 2023, there's no money out there. 2022, it's always also impossible, right? And I think that Monta has, have proven from the get-go, like when you started, that you were able to raise venture dollars. At the same time, I think anybody who's ever tried to meet you, I remember like Slush, was it 2 years ago, when like you had booked people 15 minutes, like all day, not pitching. You're just sitting down with them, like, this is what we do, we're not raising money. And then you did that for 2 days and you walked out and then said, like, we're not raising. You're both a very reluctant entrepreneur, and you're also a very reluctant fundraiser, but you're building a good company and you're raising good money. Like, what's the secret? They can't be only sleep.
Yeah, so I think fundraising was new for me when we started Monta. So I reached out to my network and got some advice from founders and people I knew, and got introduced to you quickly. But I think it's about, like, I think first of all the industry we're in, that it's electrification, it's climate tech, it's tech have been to our advantage for sure. Being able to show that we can actually grow this pretty quickly have been advantages. I think early on we spent a lot of time explaining the electric vehicle industry to every single investor. This year it really changed. Like everyone have like start looking into it a lot. So the conversation starts at a very different level now. Now we're also at a size both with markets and revenue, etc., where we are getting attractive in many different ways. So I don't know what the secret is, but I think I was always taught from Jeppe Rendum, which I also have asked some for advice multiple times. It's also about spending some time on it, and we're meeting with a lot as well. So it's not just only inbound.
No, but I think that the core, I think you're building a great company. Of course, that's the core. And it's funny, like you said about being climate. I think we see it exactly the same. As like you can't build a company with a first thesis of saving the world. You have to build a company by building a company, and then you have to kind of play your part. But then I was also thinking like 2023, the way we're at now. Where do you see like Monta 2024, 2025? Like what's ahead of you? Like what's the plan? You're 200 people right now.
Yeah.
Like you're starting to stabilize the grid. You're like EV charging. What's happening? One quick question: how much of revenue right now is enterprises?
So it's like 65% this year now.
The shift has really been there.
Yeah.
But like, what goes ahead now? What's the next stage of Monta as a company?
So we believe that what we are onto now is a really good place to be. There's not that much competition on the enterprise space right now. So that's what we are just doubling down on, continuing across the core markets here in Europe. We are planning to expand into the US market next year. So that's the playbook for next year, is opening up a few more countries here in Europe, and then a big expansion into US and investing a lot of time and money on that. And headcount-wise, I think we're planning on maybe hiring another 140 next year. So still continuing to invest a lot.
You take the last pieces of your huge, amazing office, like throughout the last tenants. For the tenants who are in the room, you know that it's like you're not going to be able to stay there next year.
Yes.
Too bad.
Yeah, but it's we're investing a lot into technology. Half of the team is in product engineering, and we believe that that's our advantage in the long run as well.
Thank you very much, Casper. This has been really great. And give it up for Casper at Monta.